Hello again, YouTubers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm your host, the Board Game Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and showing you how to play Knit Wit. Now, Knit Wit was designed by Matt Leacock, and it was published by Z-Man Games. Now, Knit Wit is a word-based party game. It is for ages 8 and up, 2 to 8 players, and is listed as being a 15-minute game. So let's start there. Now, the 8 and up is a pretty good estimate, though some children under 8 would be able to play this game. The thing you need to use as a barometer for whether your child would be able to play this game is they need to be able to read and write, and they need to be able to categorize things and also think a little bit outside the box. If a child is able to do that and is under 8, they'll probably be able to play this game. But in the same token, if your child is over 8 but really has trouble with those particular areas, this may not be the game for them. Now, the 15 minutes is a slight underestimate. This is more of like a 20-minute game, especially when you're playing with 4 or more players. Now, I do want to draw attention, though, and this is a bit more important to me than the age listed on the box and the time listed on the box, the number of players listed on the box. Now, I have not yet played it at the enormous number of players of 8. I haven't done that yet, but I have played it at 2, 3, 4, and 5 players. And I have to say, this game doesn't work at 2 players. This game is great as a multiplayer game, especially at 4 and 5 players. This game plays really, really well at 4 and 5 players. I love it at those sizes. However, at 2 players, there's some fundamental issues with the game where it really kind of breaks down and doesn't work right. So that being said, we played it once at 2 players, Lynn and I, and we decided that we would never do that again. So this is a case where they threw the 2 players on there to try to, in my opinion, as a selling tool, so that when you're looking at it in the store, you say, oh, look, I can play it with me and my significant other. Or I can play it with the whole family or when I have people over. It's so versatile, but it's not. It's really a multiplayer game. The more the merrier has been my experience with this game. You want a good number of players. 2 players doesn't really work. Okay, so now this game was one we picked up at Gen Con. It was not one that we had on our list to get ahead of time. It was one that Lynn saw at the Z-Man Games booth when we were over there shopping, and she said, oh, that looks like fun. Lynn is a big fan of knitting, and she also likes party games, so she said, let's check this out. You know, it's got a cool craft theme to it, which is kind of neat. I mean, here on the cover you can see all the thread and spools and such. Now, this is not a game about crafting. This is not a game about knitting. This is a word game. The closest other game I can think of to compare it to would be the classic party game of Scattergories. If you ever played Scattergories, you'll notice some similarities. It's still very different, and it does distinguish itself from Scattergories quite a bit, but I do feel that the designer, Matt Leacock, probably took some inspiration from the classic game of Scattergories. He might have noticed that there haven't really been any good updates to Scattergories and decided to do an update himself. That being said, I think this is an interesting new take. So let's take a look at the components. So the first thing is you've got this slip case here. The box actually comes out of the slip case, which has all that on the back there. And the slip case is a nice, covered in thread. You have the button there. It says, Nitwit, a game of loops and spools. Now, I do want to draw attention to this box, because this is one of those cases where the game company is giving you a very nice box for your game. The box magnetically closes, which is really cool, in addition to having the slipcase. And then it has proper nice places to hold your spools and your cards and your rules. It has a pocket for the rules, which is really cool. This is a really nice box. So let's take a look at some of the components. So first off, we have the rules. Now the rules are, it's not a full color rule book, but it is a color rule book. It's on what looks like, and it keeps with the theme in that regard. It looks like instructions for crafting things. It's on brown paper with orange and blue writing to help differentiate between different types of rules and different scenarios. And it's got lots of diagrams, which I really like. This is not a super complicated game, so the rulebook is only about 4 pages. And for what it is, for being a 4-page rule book, it is clear, it's concise, and it doesn't really leave you with any questions unanswered. So it is a well put together rule book, and it works well. So thumbs up for the rule book. The next thing I want to show you is we have these lovely spools. Now these are wood. These are solid wood thread spools. Each one has a number painted on it. So here is the 8. Here is the 6. These are great. These are a real nice sturdy component. I mean, these are going to last forever. These are really well. They have some kind of you can see they're shiny. They have some sort of maybe gloss varnish on them to even make them more sturdy and durable. These components do really feel substantial. And I have to give a big thumbs up for the quality of the components of this game. Now the next major component are the threads. This is a pretty important component in the game. The threads are, each one is a loop of thread that when you first open the game you have to tie around, and it has instructions on how to do it. Tie a knot in it to attach it to a clothespin of the same color. So nice wooden metal clothespin, standard clothespin, and really nice sturdy piece of thread. And you have a bunch of them of all different colors. These are one of the primary components along with the loops, and are very nice, very well done. The next piece I want to show you, again, a nice solid wood piece, are these buttons. Now the buttons are bonuses for scoring, and the number of holes you have in the buttons, you see here is a 1 and here is a 3, is how many extra points they're worth. These get stacked in the middle of the table during the game. I'm going to show you how that works when I'm showing you how to play the game. The next bit of components I want to show you, this is where the cards come from, this box here. The cards, which are right, they look like this, have categories on them. So this category, of course, is uncommon. And this is very important to the game. The main point of the game is that we are categorizing the different spools on the tables. Each spool has a different number. We categorize it by putting the loops around them and putting these cards and the clothespins on the loop. And then later you have to come up with an answer for each clothespin based around what loops are around. It has to fit the categories of each loop. That's the main mechanic of the game, and I'm going to show you how that works when we're playing later. Then here we have a nice bag of white pencils. They actually write in white, and the reason for that is that it comes with a pad. Very nice pad with an elastic band around it here. The band is actually attached on the back there. And this pad is a tear-off pad with black paper, so you need the white pencils to write on. It's a nice little score pad. Very nicely done. It is necessary to score this game. And quite often, many games will have the necessity of writing your score down, and they'll just tell you to, of course, get a piece of paper and write it down on there, but this actually comes with a score pad and some pencils. So I do rather appreciate that. That is nice. So that's all the components you have here for Nitwit. Now we're going to head over. I'm going to show you how you play Nitwit. Then we're going to come back. I'm going to talk about how it feels. I'm going to review it and rate it, and then we're going to get a second opinion from Len. Okay, so here we see a setup for 4 players of Nitwit. Now the reason I chose to do a 4-player game, even though I'm going to have to, of course, play every side of this 4-player game, is that 4 players is one of my favorites number of players for this game. I think it plays really well with a good number of players. So one specific note I want to draw attention to, because I'm going to be doing something wrong intentionally, and that is with the cards. You draw from the front of the box and you put it in the back. I'm going to be drawing from the back because I'm going to be using cards we've already seen as not to ruin some future cards for myself and my gaming group. So this is how the game plays. For 4 players, it has a variable number, depending on how many players you're playing, of how many spools and how many loops each player gets, as well as how many buttons you have set up on the table. Now for 4 players, each player has 2 spools and 2 loops, so that all the loops and spools in the game are used, and 3 of the 4 buttons are used as they are stacked there on the table. The buttons are stacked from least valuable, the number 1, to 2, to 3, most valuable. Now, during your turn, you have to do the following. First, you place a loop on the table, Then you place a word in the clothespin on the loop, and then you place a spool. Now, when you place a loop, that loop must go around one spool that is already on the middle of the table. The one exception to this is the very first person to place a loop, because there are no spools on the table yet, but then they are about to immediately place one of their spools on the table. So when you place a spool, the spool must be inside loops that are already on the table in a space that no other spool is at. You can't have any two spools that are exactly the same. So I'll show you how that works in a second here. So I'm going to start with this player here who's going to place their blue loop on the table. So that first placement is very simple. They're then going to draw one of the cards, and in this case the card is uncommon. So they place uncommon in the clothespin, and then they place their number 2 spool inside the loop of uncommon. So now this is one loop inside the table, one area they can place it, and there are no other spools in that area, so they are absolutely fine with that placement. The next player then is going to place one of their loops. Now there is a spool on the table, so they have to surround it. So they place it like so. They draw a card, and their card is tall. So now spool number 2 there has to be both tall and uncommon. Then they're going to place one of their loops. Now they can place it in any area that is inside some of the loops, but not in with another spool. So they can't place it in this area here, but they can place it here, 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 or here. So they're going to decide to place it here. So now spool number 1 is going to be tall, while spool number 2 is uncommon and tall. So now player number 3 is going to throw down their maroon loop. And again, they have to cover one of the ones there. So they're going to cover the number 1, surround the number 1, and the maroon loop is going to be mean. Which means that loop number 1 is now tall and mean, while loop number 2 is tall and uncommon. They then must also place one of their spools, which has to again go in an area where no one has placed spools yet. So they have decided they're going to place it in this area here. You can move the thread a little bit to make room, so that this one, number 4, will be uncommon and mean. So then we're going to go on to the third player, who's going to use their white spool, and they've decided they're going to try to make a fairly high point spool with number 2. They're going to surround number 2, like so, and they're going to make it male. So number 2 is tall, male, and uncommon. Then they're going to place their number 6 spool here in male. So it is just male. That's an easy one. It's a only got one category for it so far. So now we go back to the first player. And the first player is going to wrap a spool around the male one. They decide they're going to up that to a 2-pointer. And they're going to draw a category for it, so it is male and imaginary. Male and imaginary. But then they're going to place their spool in imaginary, so it is just imaginary. Then the number 2 player is going to place their yellow thread around, let's see, they're going to do it around the 4 spool, which is currently male and uncommon. But now it is going to be male, uncommon, and greasy. Male, uncommon, and greasy. And then they're going to place their spool over here in something that is just male. Then the number 3 player has decided, well, that 1-pointer is too simple. Let's up the complexity on that. It's going to be male and green. And then they're going to make one that's just green. And then this player here is decided the imaginary one they're going to wrap around. And that's now going to be imaginary and round. And they're going to place one that is just round. So now this is a full round of placing it on the table. And as you can see, some are far simpler than others. You have some that only have 1 thread around them. You have some that has as many as 3 threads around them. And this is common. I've seen them go as high as 4 threads around a single spool. That does happen. Usually people get a little panicky when they start to get to that much and stop putting threads around that spool though. So then after you do that, everyone has one of these scoring sheets here. And what you do is you have the scoring sheet is numbered 1 through 8. And in this case, we're using all spools 1 through 8. So what you have to do is you each take a scoring sheet, you each take a pencil. The person who is the starting player says, ready, set, go, and you all start writing in your answers. So for each answer, you have to look. So spool number 1, let's take a look at spool number 1. Spool number 1 is surrounded by this teal loop, which is tall. It's surrounded by this maroon loop, which is mean. So it is something that is mean and tall. So maybe for, the first player says, mean and tall. What is mean and tall? King Kong is mean and tall. I'm going to put King Kong down. There you go. And I doubt anyone's going to argue that King Kong is both mean and tall. Then we're going to go to number 2. You go to the 2 spool. Now the 2 spool has the white thread around it, which is male. It has the teal thread around it, which is tall. And it has the blue thread around it, which is uncommon. So it has to be something that is tall, male, and uncommon. So they think for a second, say, what is tall, male, and uncommon? And now, maybe they have a little trouble with that one, so they say, you know what, I'm going to pass that by, I'm going to come back to it, I'm going to think on it. And that's fine, and that happens a lot. So they move on to spool number 3, because they say, you know what, that one's a little tough. But spool number 3 is round, and that's really, really easy, because they could say a circle, they could say a cookie, they could say a beach ball. Any of those are fine. They write that down, and that's a quick one, and they just move on to spool number 4. And spool number 4 is a little bit of a tough one, too. It's because it's uncommon, it's mean, and it's greasy. Uncommon, mean, and greasy. So they're going to say, you know what I'm going to say? Pizza the Hut. Because if you've ever seen the movie Spaceballs, you know who Pizza the Hut is. And he's uncommon, mean, and greasy. So that's a pretty good one right there. And then they're going to go on to spool number 5. And spool number 5 is just something that's green. So they're going to say peas. Because peas are green. Now this is how you do it. You go as quickly as you can and you go through all the spools and you try to come up with answers. You skip some that are too hard, you come back to them later. That's fine. If you answer every one of the 8 spools, or if you decide that one or some of them are too hard and you can't come up with an answer to them and you want to stop, you signify your stopping by flipping over your paper and grabbing the top button on the stack, which I just realized I have accidentally done in the wrong order. It should go from highest points to lowest. My mistake, fixing that now. So the first player to finish grabs the 3-point button. They say, done. They put the 3-point button in front of them, they flip over their score sheet, and they stop writing. The next player to finish, or be reasonably finished, they have some they can't answer and they just decide to give up on those, they do the same thing. They grab the 2-point button and they say, done! Then the third player to finish grabs the 1-point button and says done, and the fourth player who did not finish has to stop writing. They can finish writing if they're in the middle of writing an answer, but they then stop. And then we score it. Everybody goes around the table and we say, okay, well, what did you put for number 1? And everybody figures out what they put for number 1. If 2 players put the same answer for number 1, they cancel each other out and no one gets points for them. Also, if 3 or 4 players, or any number of players, any time you have duplicates, they cancel out and you get no points. However, if you have a unique answer, you get a number of points equal to how many loops are around that spool. So number 1, again, which is tall and mean, and we said player 1 said King Kong, if nobody else said King Kong, that's a 2-point spool right there. Boom, 2 points. Now spool number 2 was male, uncommon, and tall. That's a little harder, but that's a 3-point spool. Now we showed you spool number 3 was just round, and we gave you a bunch of answers like beach ball, cookie, and circle, which are all things that are round and could be very easy to answer for number 3. But as easy as number 3 is, it's also only 1 point. So you see how many points you got. Whoever got the most points wins the game of Nitwit. It's that easy. That's how you play. And let's head back to the table. We're going to talk about how it feels. I'm going to review it. I'm going to rate it, and I'm going to get a second opinion from Lynn. Okay, welcome back. Now I've got a couple of things I want to go over real quick before I get into the review portion of this video. A few things that I forgot or didn't emphasize enough when showing you how to play. The first thing, which Lynn pointed out to me that I completely forgot to tell you guys, I forgot to do while doing the demonstration, was that the first player Nitwit is decided by the player who is randomly dealt the spool with the number 1 on it, if you were using all spools, or the spool with the lowest number if you were not using all the spools. I forgot to do that, and the person who I started playing with did not have the number 1 spool. That was my mistake, and this is the correction for that. The second thing, which I did mention briefly but wanted to emphasize a little bit more, is that when you're scoring, you get an extra number of points equal to the number of holes in the button you obtained. So the earlier you obtain it, the more holes it has and the more extra points it's worth. The third thing, which is a rather important rule that I accidentally completely omitted when telling you how to play, which is the Nitwit Role. Now the way this works is, if someone gives an answer to one of the groups of categories that you find to be not right, just incorrect. Let's say the category says tall, male, and uncommon. And someone's really trying to stretch it a little bit and they come up with an answer something along the lines of, say, Dracula. Let's say they say Dracula. And you think, well, wait a minute, Dracula, he's male. But I mean, is it really documented that he's tall? It depends on what actor's playing him in a movie. And did they specifically say he was tall in the book? I don't remember. And is he really uncommon? There's a lot of vampire characters around there these days. I mean, back when Dracula was written, he was uncommon, but he's not really that uncommon anymore. So you want to challenge the person on it. You say, Nitwit. And as soon as you say Nitwit to the person, the challenge is on. They have 10 seconds to justify their answer, why they think he is uncommon, tall, and male. The male part's going to be the easy part there. And then after they try to justify it, everybody votes. When I say everyone, that includes the person whose answer was Dracula. So they have to be outvoted for their points not to count. If there's a tie, so let's say you're playing with 4 people, and of course the person whose answer it was is going to vote that they're right. Let's say they get one of the other people to vote with them. That's all they need. They're good. If 2 people vote against them, they can't outvote them. But see, now, this mechanic is very cool, and I like it a lot in 3 or more player games. But this mechanic is very important in understanding why this game does not work at 2 players. You see, in 2 players, you can never be outvoted. And once you realize that, you can answer anything to anything. It doesn't really matter. Let's say the categories around the spool said blue, short, and grumpy. And you could answer the Jolly Green Giant, who is not blue, he's not short, and he's certainly not grumpy. But when your opponent calls you on it and it says Nitwit, you say, well, I vote I'm right. And you can't be outvoted in a 2-player game, which is why this game should really say 3 or more players, because in a 2-player game, that basic mechanic breaks down, and I mean, you're really playing on the honor system. But I gave an extreme example, but there's going to be times where you say something that really doesn't fit 1 or 2 of the categories that are around them, and your opponent's going to call you on it. And of course, you're always going to vote for yourself. You're going to be like, no, I'm right. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm totally right. So it kind of breaks down at 2 players. But the game itself, at 3 or more players, feels a lot of fun. I mean, this is a fun party game. It's a lighter game. It's a quicker game. It's a game that you can play on game night as a filler game between other bigger, heavier games. Or, you can play, I've done as many as 3 or 4 games of this in a row, where you play it and everybody's like, that was fun, let's play it again. Great, you go right back on and play it again. Or play it with a bunch of shorter games in succession while you're waiting for everybody else to show up. Maybe not everyone's shown up yet, and you're going to be playing a bigger, heavier game once everybody shows up to game night. It works fantastic in that capacity. It also works as a great game for introducing people to board gaming who maybe don't game as much as you do. It's a bit of a lighter game, so people who are not as into hardcore gaming and have only played classic games can still get this very easily, and it's a great entryway game. And then in regard to that, it's also a great game to play with the family and to teach children, because it's not that complicated. So if you like the theme, if you like word games, if you like some lighter fare, some lighter games to play for helping to introduce to new gamers, young gamers, as filler games on game night, if any of that applies to you, I do recommend this game. This game is a lot of fun. In fact, I specifically give it a 7 out of 10 stars, which is a positive rating, which says I'm going to ask to play this game many times in the future, and anytime somebody asks to play this game, I'm going to say yes. I mean, I cannot act honestly. If I asked the people in the room, you guys want to play a game, and somebody says, hey, let's play Nitwit, I can't see myself saying no. It's tons of fun. I only don't give it a higher rating than 7, even though 7 is a positive rating. I only don't go higher for a few small reasons. One being that I think the 2-player version literally doesn't work. One being that it is fairly light in the rules, and I more often give higher ratings to games that have a bit more meat to sink your teeth into, more complicated games. But it's fun, and I can't deny it. I can't deny that I enjoy it every time I play it. So I like this game. So I do recommend it to you if any of that pertains to you. So, now that being said, let's get a second opinion. Lynn, out of 10 stars, how many would you give to Nitwit?
7.
Ah, so now Lynn also gave it 7, and that's not much of a surprise because she has asked to play this game quite a bit, and this was her purchase. And she loves the theme, the whole crafting theme, as well as she's a fan of word games. So that is a 2 thumbs up review from Lynn and I. We both like this game, and we both recommend this game to you. So now, do you need to comment on anything? Did I miss anything? Did I screw anything up that you want to let me know? Comment down below. Do you have any questions you want to ask me about the game or the video? Feel free to put it in the comments down below on YouTube. And if you like this video and you want to see us do more like it, please, please, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, game on.